Hello, you're on the Reddit Reveals channel. She was laughing when I walked in. Loud, effortless, like the past had never happened. It echoed across the auditorium, bouncing off the metal chairs and the stage lights, landing right in my gut. She tilted her head back like she always did when she found something hilarious, the kind of laugh that made people turn and look. Even now, surrounded by strangers and staff and parents, she still had that gravity. She didn't see me at first. I stood behind the last row, clutching the invitation I'd unfolded and refolded a dozen times. The paper had creases like scars. My palms were sweating so badly, the ink had started to blur. Callum's name was printed near the bottom of the program. Graduating with honors. The last time I'd seen his name was on a school report card I wasn't supposed to receive. She turned around just as they started announcing the next row of students. Her smile froze mid-laugh, lips still parted, teeth showing. It didn't fade slowly. It snapped, like something inside her cracked. For a moment, she didn't move. Then her hands dropped into her lap, like dead weight. Her eyes widened. Her spine went rigid. She looked at me the way someone might look at an old photograph they didn't remember taking. Equal parts confusion and dread. I didn't wave. I didn't blink. I just watched. For years. For full years of silence. Not a message. Not a call. Not a birthday card. And yet here we were, breathing the same air again, for the first time since the night she destroyed everything. And I wasn't even sure why I came. Closure? Curiosity? Spite? Maybe it was the email I'd received at 3:12 a.m. 2 weeks ago. No subject. No signature. Just 5 words. You should be at graduation. I still didn't know who sent it. But something about the way it was worded, it didn't feel like an invitation. It felt like a warning. Fern didn't blink. Not even once. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her purse, knocking it off her lap and onto the floor. A few things spilled out, a compact mirror, some keys, a crumpled tissue, and yet she didn't move to pick any of it up. It was like she'd forgotten where she was. The noise around her, clapping, cheering, the principal's voice over the mic, it all just kept going, oblivious to the personal earthquake unraveling in the third row. I didn't expect her to react that way. I didn't expect her to react at all. A woman like Fern, she always knew how to keep it together. She could lie with a straight face and make you thank her for it. She could cry on command. She could convince anyone of anything, especially herself. But now, her mask cracked, and for the first time since I left, I saw something real. Fear. Not guilt. Not sadness. Not even anger. Fear. And I knew instantly that this wasn't about me showing up. This wasn't the reaction of someone who's surprised to see an ex. This was the reaction of someone whose entire world just got exposed, and who didn't know what came next. I stepped further into the auditorium. Her eyes followed me like I was a live grenade. I could see the gears turning in her head. Should she get up? Should she run? Should she pretend she didn't see me? I sat in the back corner, far enough not to make a scene, but close enough that she couldn't ignore me. I didn't take my eyes off her. Not once. Callum was already on stage now. He looked older, taller. He wore the same tight-lipped smile I used to wear in every school photo, the kind that says, "Let me go home now." His eyes scanned the crowd briefly, and I swear, for the tiniest second, they landed on me. No reaction. But he saw me. That was enough. For now, the ceremony dragged. I couldn't focus. I kept watching Fern, and Fern kept shifting like the seat had turned into hot iron. She whispered something to the man next to her. I didn't recognize him. Gray blazer, receding hairline, oversized watch. He looked older than her. Not Greg. Not any mutual friend I remembered. Whoever he was, he leaned away when she spoke, like he didn't want to be involved. That's when it hit me. She didn't tell him I was coming. Or worse, she didn't tell him I existed. When the ceremony ended, and people began to stand, I expected her to make a beeline for the exit. She didn't. She stayed in her seat for a good 2 minutes, just staring forward, face expressionless, as families laughed and hugged around her. The man she came with tried to say something. She shook her head once. He looked annoyed but didn't push. Then she stood and walked straight toward me. Her heels clicked against the gym floor like gunshots. She didn't smile, didn't blink, just marched right up to the row I was in and stopped a few feet away. We stood there, surrounded by the chaos of celebration, locked in the quietest war I've ever been a part of. "You shouldn't have come," she said quietly, almost like a threat. I looked her in the eyes, really looked, and replied without hesitation. Then why did someone make sure I did? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. And that's when I knew. She had no idea who sent the message either. And worse, someone else did know. She stood there, breathing through her nose like she was trying not to scream. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her purse. Her knuckles had gone white. For a second, I thought she was going to slap me. I almost hoped she would. At least then I'd know what she was feeling. But instead, she whispered, "You're not supposed to be here." I gave her the faintest shrug, the kind that says too bad. And yet here I am. She looked around nervously. Her eyes darted across the crowd like someone might be watching her. Not me, her. And that's when it hit me again. She wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of what I knew. Or what I might know. I leaned in, just enough for only her to hear. "You didn't send the message, did you?" She didn't respond. Her eyes stayed locked on mine, but she didn't speak. She didn't even shake her head. That silence told me everything. She wasn't in control anymore, and she hated that. "Who is he?" I nodded subtly toward the man she was with. "New husband." "None of your business," she snapped, too fast, too defensive. "Oh," I said, dragging out the word. "He doesn't know, does he?" That was when her eyes actually flashed, pure panic. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. "Stop. I haven't said anything." "You're about to," she said. I know that look. I wanted to laugh, but nothing about this was funny. I'd spent 4 years buried under the weight of her decisions, trying to forget a life I didn't even get to mourn properly. Now, standing here, I realized she hadn't buried anything. She'd just built a new life on top of a minefield. Callum walked by then, still in his gown, flanked by classmates and someone who looked like a coach. He didn't see us, or pretended not to. Either way, it stung. I turned back to Fern. "I want to talk to him." She shook her head instantly. "No. You don't get to decide that anymore. I do when you're going to ruin everything." That's when I lost it, not in a loud, explosive way, but in that bitter, worn-down kind of voice that comes from years of staying quiet. "Everything was already ruined, Fern. You just made it look pretty." She opened her mouth, then closed it. I could see it happening in real time, her calculating what I knew, what I didn't, and how much longer she could keep everything from caving in. But I wasn't there to beg or to blame. I wasn't even sure why I said what I said next. Did he ever ask about me? Her jaw tensed. I stepped closer. "I need to know." Her eyes flicked away. "He asked once." "And what did you tell him?" She hesitated, then whispered, "That you left because you couldn't handle it." I closed my eyes. Not because it hurt. I was numb to that kind of pain now. I closed them because I needed a second not to scream in the middle of a school gymnasium. She started to walk away, but before she did, she said something low, fast, almost like she was choking on it. "If you talk to him, you'll find out. And if he finds out, I lose him." I froze. Find out what? But she was already gone. And suddenly the message made more sense than ever. Because someone wanted me to break the illusion. And someone else was willing to lose everything just to keep it alive. I didn't leave the ceremony right away. I sat there, long after the clapping stopped, after the balloons were passed around, after most parents left to take their kids out for overpriced celebration dinners. The janitor gave me a polite look like he wasn't sure if I was homeless or just heartbroken. Maybe both. I stared at the stage where Callum had stood. I couldn't get the image out of my head. How grown he looked. His walk was confident, his eyes focused, his smile small but real. I didn't give him that. I wasn't part of the blueprint. That pride he carried? That belonged to someone else now. Probably the man in the gray blazer. But Fern's face, that was the part that wouldn't let go. Her terror wasn't about me. It was about a truth buried so deep, even she had to fake not knowing it. And now I had a choice. Leave town with silence again, or tear the past wide open. So I stayed. I rented the cheapest motel I could find. One of those places where the O in motel flickers like a heartbeat that's about to stop. The room smelled like bleach and something older, sadder. I laid on the stiff mattress and stared at the popcorn ceiling until my thoughts got too loud. I knew what I had to do, even if every part of me hated myself for it. I emailed Callum. I had no phone number, no real contact. But the graduation program listed a student email address for parents to send digital cards. It was something. Subject, just me. "Hey, I was there today. You probably saw me." Maybe not. I didn't want to cause anything, just wanted to see you walk that stage. You looked strong. I know you don't owe me anything. But if you want to talk, even for 5 minutes, I'll be at Nate's diner tomorrow at 2. I'll sit at the window. You don't have to say a word. Just show up if you want. I didn't sleep. I just waited for morning like it owed me something. The next day, I got to Nate's at 1:45. Ordered coffee I didn't want and a sandwich I wouldn't touch. The diner hadn't changed in the 4 years I'd been gone. Same cracked vinyl booths, same waitress with the cigarette voice, same scent of grease and syrup. I sat by the window, back straight, heart pounding like I was 17 again and waiting for a blind date. He showed up at 2:12, wearing a hoodie, headphones around his neck, phone in hand. He didn't look at me right away. He just walked past the diner, stopped near the corner, turned like he was thinking, then walked back. When he entered, I stood up too quickly, knocking the edge of the table with my thigh. He flinched. I froze. He sat across from me like it was a school assignment he was determined to fail. "Hey," I said. He nodded. I didn't ask how he was. I didn't ask if he was mad. I just asked, "Did you send the message?" His eyebrows creased. "What message?" So it wasn't him. I stared at him, searching for signs of hesitation, but he looked genuinely confused. "Never mind," I said. He leaned back, crossing his arms. "Why are you really here?" "I got your invitation." He frowned. "I didn't send one." There it was, confirmation. Fern didn't send it. He didn't send it. So who did? I felt my stomach twist. "I got an anonymous message," I admitted. "Told me to be at graduation." His eyes narrowed. "Why would someone do that?" I paused. "That's what I'm trying to find out." Callum studied me for a long time. And then, with no warning, he said something that shattered my composure. "Did you cheat on Mom?" My breath caught. "What?" "She told me that's why you left. That you had someone else." I blinked. "No. God, no." He looked away, jaw clenched. "Then why did you leave and never come back?" And there it was, not anger. Abandonment. It was worse. I opened my mouth to explain. But how do you unpack years of betrayal, silence, lies, and pain into one clean sentence? "You ever ask her?" I managed to say. He shrugged. "She said you didn't want to fight. That you ran." I looked down. She was half right. He leaned forward. "So what's the other half?" I looked him in the eyes. "I didn't run because I was guilty. I ran because I found something I wasn't supposed to. And your mom made sure I'd disappear quietly." He froze. His expression changed. Not disbelief, not trust, something in between. A recognition. Like he knew what it felt like to live in a house with shadows and never ask what they were. "I don't know who you are anymore," he said softly. "I'm trying to remember myself too," I replied. And then, just before leaving, he said something that chilled me. "If someone's sending you messages, you're not the only one they've been sending things to." It had rained while I was in the diner. The kind of slow, soaking rain that turns parking lots into mirrors. I sat in my rental car for a while after Callum left, watching the streaks crawl down the windshield, trying to piece together everything he'd said, and more importantly, what he didn't say. Someone else had been getting messages. He didn't say who. He didn't say when. But the way his voice dipped on that final sentence, the way his eyes darted toward the door like he'd already said too much, it was enough to make my skin crawl. I drove back to the motel with a tightness in my chest I couldn't shake. I kept replaying that conversation over and over in my mind. Fern lied to him about why I left. She told him I cheated, that I'd walked out to chase some fantasy. And now, years later, he was trying to reconcile the version of me she built in his head with the quiet, tired man sitting across from him at a greasy diner booth. It wasn't fair, but none of this had been fair. I thought maybe the day had squeezed out all its surprises. I was wrong, because when I got back to my motel room, there was an envelope waiting for me. No address, no stamp, just slid under my door. I stared at it for a full minute before I picked it up. It was heavier than I expected. Thick. I peeled it open with shaky fingers and pulled out a stack of printed photos. No note, no explanation, just image after image. And my world tilted sideways. The first photo was Fern, taken from a distance. She was in a parking lot, talking to someone. Her face partially turned, caught mid-sentence. The next few were similar. Different angles, different days. Always from far away, always unposed. Sometimes alone, sometimes with Callum. Then came the ones that stole the breath from my lungs. There she was, with Greg. Still him. Still the same arrogant, smug grin he used to flash across our dinner table when he told his dumb stories. Only now, he looked older, heavier, but unmistakably him. They weren't doing anything overt. No kissing, no touching, but the familiarity was there. The closeness. In one, they were standing outside what looked like a small clinic. Fern had her hand on her stomach. I flipped through the rest, my heart pounding louder with each one. The final photo made my hands go numb. It was a birth certificate, not a scan. A photo of a real document, folded and creased, like it had been passed between hands too many times. The name listed under father, Gregory Ellis. The mother? Fern. The child? Callum Ellis. My entire body went cold. No, this couldn't be real. I read it again, and again. My eyes blurred, but the words didn't change. That name, Ellis, that wasn't a typo. That was deliberate. That was erasure. She hadn't just cut me out emotionally. She'd rewritten everything. I dropped the papers on the bed like they were poison. My mind raced through timelines, memories, birthdays, arguments. I remembered Callum's second-grade project about where we come from. Fern insisted she help him. She said I'd overcomplicate it. I remembered Greg being around a lot more during those months. I remembered the way they used to lock eyes when they thought I wasn't looking. All these years I thought she cheated and kept it quiet. But now I was starting to think it was so much worse. She'd planned it. And someone who knew everything, was now feeding me proof. But why now? And why me? I sat on the edge of the bed, the photos laid out in front of me like evidence in a courtroom. Part of me wanted to burn them. Another part wanted to storm into Fern's house and confront her with every one of them. But a different voice, a quieter, colder voice, told me to wait. Because if someone had gone through this much trouble to expose her secret, it meant the game wasn't over yet. It had only just started. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even lie down. I just sat in the motel chair, staring at the photographs under the flickering lamp like they were going to change if I looked long enough. I kept trying to find some flaw, some trace of Photoshop, something that would let me believe they weren't real. But they were. The dates on the bottom corners matched. The shadows were consistent. The angles too natural to be fake. These weren't screenshots from social media or random surveillance. Someone had followed her. Someone had watched. Someone had kept this information for years and was only now choosing to weaponize it. And I was their chosen blade. Why? What did they want me to do with this? At 6:30 a.m., I put the photos back into the envelope and drove. I didn't even change clothes. I hadn't showered. I hadn't eaten. I was running on fumes and adrenaline and a kind of silent rage that I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't even sure where I was going until I saw the familiar curve of their street. Her street. The house looked the same. Blue shutters, cracked driveway, that stupid ceramic frog still sitting by the porch steps like nothing had changed. Except everything had changed. I parked down the block and walked. My legs were shaking as I stood in front of the door, envelope in hand, heart slamming against my ribs. My fist hovered for a second, then I knocked. It took a minute. I heard movement, then silence. Then the door cracked open. Fern stood there, in a robe, her hair slightly damp like she'd just stepped out of the shower. She blinked in shock, but this time, she didn't look scared. She looked exhausted. "I need to talk to you," I said. She didn't argue. She stepped aside, and I walked into the house I hadn't seen in 4 years. It smelled like lemon cleaner and coffee. The living room had been rearranged. The photo frames had changed. I didn't see a single one of me. We sat. She didn't offer tea, or a fake smile. She just crossed her legs and waited. I dropped the envelope on the coffee table. She didn't touch it. "What is this?" she asked flatly. "You already know." Her eyes didn't leave mine, but her throat moved. She was trying to swallow a scream. "That birth certificate," I said, "is it real?" She didn't answer. "I want to hear you say it, Fern." She leaned forward, elbows on knees, like the weight of her own lies was finally catching up. "It doesn't change anything," she whispered. "Doesn't change anything?" I laughed once, bitter, empty. "You changed everything. You changed his name. You changed his father. You rewrote his entire life. You were weak," she snapped suddenly. "You never stood up for yourself. You were always waiting for permission to exist. I didn't want him to grow up like that." I stared at her, stunned. "So you erased me?" She looked away. "That's what this was?" I asked. "You get bored, fall into Greg's arms, and when the test came back, you just decided to make him the father?" "It wasn't like that." "Then tell me what it was like." She was silent. I stood up, pacing. My voice rose without my permission. I stayed quiet. "I left without causing a scene. I let you raise him your way. But you didn't just want me gone. You wanted me deleted. Greg wanted to be there, she said coldly. You didn't fight. I didn't know I was in a war. She finally picked up the envelope and looked inside. Her face didn't flinch. She'd already seen these. Maybe not the exact copies, but the truth wasn't new to her. Then I asked the one question I'd never let myself consider before. Does he know? She looked up sharply. Does Callum know Greg's not his biological father? The pause between my question and her answer was the longest 3 seconds of my life. No, she whispered. And that was it. That was the moment I knew I wasn't just dealing with betrayal. I was dealing with manipulation on a level I didn't even know Fern was capable of. She hadn't just lied to me. She'd lied to him. His entire life. About his identity. His blood. His story. She had rewritten history and made sure I wouldn't be there to correct it. But now, someone was making sure the truth came out. Piece by piece. I took a step toward the door. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what came next. But I knew this. I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. And Fern? She wasn't afraid of what I knew. She was terrified of what Callum was about to find out. I didn't go back to the motel. I drove in circles for hours, engine humming under me like it was trying to distract me from my own thoughts. The sky darkened. Streetlights flickered on. I passed gas stations, mini-marts, playgrounds, places I once took Callum when weekends still belonged to us. Every corner of this town held a ghost version of me, one who didn't know what was coming. Fern's face haunted me. Not just the lies. Not even the audacity to pretend it didn't change anything. What haunted me was how calm she looked when she said it. Like she had made peace with the lie a long time ago and expected I should too. But I couldn't. I kept seeing Callum's face in the diner. The way he looked at me like he was trying to recognize someone he'd only ever seen through a fogged-up window. That boy deserved the truth, even if it shattered him. It was nearly midnight when I finally turned the car toward the address I hadn't dared to visit in years. Greg's place. He'd moved since the last time I knew anything about him. I had to Google the name of his business, Ellis Renovations, and find a company listing. He wasn't hiding. He was living loud. Open. Like none of this was built on betrayal. Like he had earned everything. The new house was nicer. Bigger. 2 stories. Perfect landscaping. I parked across the street and stared at it like a man outside a museum, looking at something expensive that didn't belong to him. The porch light was still on. A car I didn't recognize sat in the driveway. Probably Fern's. I sat for nearly 20 minutes before I saw movement. The door opened. Greg stepped out onto the porch. He was on the phone, pacing. Even from across the street, I could hear the low baritone of his voice, still smug, still full of that forced charisma that made people trust him for no good reason. But what stopped me cold was what I heard him say. She doesn't know I have it. He paused, listening. No, I'm not showing it to him yet. Not until he finds the other copy. That'll force her hand. Another pause. He rubbed his face. I don't care if it blows up. I'm tired of being the one cleaning up her mess. And then he turned, stepped back inside, and the door closed. I sat frozen, hands tightening on the steering wheel. She doesn't know I have it. Have what? Another copy? Of what? Force her hand. It wasn't just me being played anymore. They were playing each other. This wasn't just Fern rewriting history. This was Greg hiding things from her too. I drove back to the motel with my head on fire. I couldn't sleep, but I couldn't think clearly either. Everything I thought I understood was slipping. The betrayal, the paternity lie, the buried documents. It all spiraled beyond Fern. Greg was holding something. Something she didn't know about. And I needed to know what it was. The next morning, I woke to a knock at my motel door. Sharp. Urgent. For a split second, I thought maybe it was Callum. It wasn't. It was a woman. Late 50s, short gray hair, sharp eyes. She held a manila folder in her hands. You're Lyle? I nodded cautiously. I work at County Records. I was asked to deliver this to you directly. Anonymous request. They paid in cash. Said you'd know what it meant. She handed me the folder and walked off without another word. Inside, I found 3 sheets of paper. 2 of them were documents from the hospital, forms filled out during Callum's birth. One was a standard birth registration form. I scanned it quickly, same lie. Father, Gregory Ellis. But the 3rd page? It stopped my breath. It was a paternity test. Sealed. Official. Dated a year after Callum was born. The tested individual, Lyle Hargrave. Me. Probability of paternity, 99. 998%. There it was. Proof. Legal. Dated. documented proof. I was his father. I was always his father. And someone had tested me, without my knowledge, and buried the result. I sat back on the bed and stared at the name in the top right corner of the report. There were 3 names listed. Mother, Fern Hale. Father, alleged Lyle Hargrave. Child, Callum Hale. Wait. Hale. Not Ellis. Not Ellis. That wasn't just a lie. That was forgery. And suddenly I understood why Greg said he had something she didn't know about. He knew I was the father. He knew, and he still signed the papers. He had helped her steal my name off that certificate. Which meant one thing. This wasn't just betrayal. It was fraud. And someone, maybe whoever had been feeding me clues this whole time, wanted me to take them both down. I held the paternity document like it might vanish if I blinked. The weight of it wasn't just in the ink and paper. It was in the confirmation of something I had always felt but was never allowed to know. That boy, my son, had always been mine. Even when they tried to erase me. Even when I disappeared because I thought it was the right thing. And now I finally had proof. Cold. Legal. Undeniable. But what was I supposed to do with it? Take them to court? Rip Callum's life apart? Walk into his world like a bulldozer and demand he see me not as the man who left, but as the father who was taken? I couldn't do that. I wouldn't. So instead, I folded the papers, put them back in the envelope, and picked up the phone. Callum answered after 3 rings. Yeah. It's me, I said. I need 5 minutes. He was quiet. Then, same diner. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Same booth. This time, he showed up right on time. He looked tired. Not angry, tired. Like he'd been thinking about too many things for too long. I slid the envelope across the table, but he didn't open it. Not yet. I'm not asking you to believe me, I said. But I need you to know the truth. He slowly pulled out the documents. His eyes scanned them, narrowing as he reached the final page. His fingers stopped at the top corner where all 3 names were printed. When he read, Lyle Hargrave, his lips parted slightly. And then he looked up. So you knew? He asked. I shook my head. Not until 2 days ago. And Mom. She's known for a long time. But she made a choice. She thought she was protecting you. He stared at the paper again. She lied. She did. He didn't speak for a while. Just kept breathing, blinking, thinking. Then he slid the envelope back toward me. I want a relationship, he said quietly. But not built on this. My throat tightened. Okay. I want to know you. Not as the guy who left. Not as a symbol. As a person. I smiled, and for the first time in a decade, it felt real. I'd like that more than anything. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just sat across from each other and ordered the same diner pancakes we used to share when he was 6 and still called me Dad, without thinking twice. The next few weeks were slow. We met twice a week. Sometimes for coffee, sometimes just to walk and talk. I told him stories from my past, ones Fern never let me tell. He asked questions. I answered honestly. He didn't always like the answers, but he listened. And slowly, the wall between us began to crack. As for Fern, I left her a letter. No threats. No lawsuits. No revenge. Just the truth. I told her I wouldn't expose her. That I wouldn't drag Callum into a war he didn't ask for. But I also made it clear she no longer controlled the story. That era was over. And Greg? I didn't speak to him. He didn't try to speak to me. Sometimes the best revenge is disappearing from someone's power and taking everything they thought they owned with you. 3 months later, Callum invited me to lunch on a Sunday. He introduced me to his girlfriend. Called me Dad without hesitation. And I swear, in that moment, the years I'd lost didn't matter as much as the ones we were about to build. The past didn't disappear, but it stopped being a prison. And that was enough.